Okay, now I get to do what I prefer, which is ask some questions. So, you know, Jonathan, I'd love to start with you and just, I mean, we haven't really prepared very much, and again, I really do want to hear from people as well if you have questions. But your time in business news, and this is financial writers, was, you know, was not a focus in your long career. You've done so many different things, a lot of it general news. I'm sort of curious, just as well, sort of how you view that period. In particular, your sort of interaction within the financial news part and how that differed from so much of the general news world that you've obviously been a part of as well, whether it was executive producing the Today Show when you were literally a child or so much of the other work you've done.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. It's great to see all the old, young faces. You know, I sort of think of my time in business news, my fleeting several years in business news as well, I remember when no one knew what a CDO was, and Leisman had to explain to all of us, and we learned on the air and in real time what was happening in the financial crisis. And it was sort of bookended by, my time there was bookended by this panic that Fox Business was going to start up, and they were going to kick our ass, and it was going to be a whole game changer, and of course, nothing of the sort happened. And then, out of left field-ish, the financial crisis, which you documented, and then it was bookended by the Madoff scandal at the end and of my time there. And I like to think that I was as good a steward as I could have been in that period, and when we all learned what was happening. And I have a distinct memory. First of all, I don't think, and this shouldn't come as a surprise, I don't know if any of us actually feel like we were ever your boss. So let's just get that. I remember once during the height of the crisis, it must have been after Bear Stearns collapsed and all this stuff was happening, that you came into my office and said, you know, if we go on the air with what I know about Goldman Sachs, they'll be out of business tomorrow. And I thought, well, that's really sobering. Next, like, what do we do? And so we all sort of put our heads together and figured it out. And to me, that was the best part of being there, was learning from everybody and applying what little, you know, guidance I could to the rest of the overall process.
Yeah, I remember it was such an interesting time because it forced us to change patterns, even though I remember walking into you and saying, I know AIG is about to announce a $99 billion loss, but we were in Kramer, which was, it's taped. And you were like, we don't know what to do.
Yeah.
We got to wait. I'm like, we got to wait. And we waited.
I forgot that.
We waited. That wouldn't, I mean, you know, we'd figure out you have to adapt. It did force the network to do that.
I don't know. I'm trying to go to Kramer's next event, so we would not break into Kramer. There's no way we break. You know.
No, we made sure he gets to do the entire show. Nik, you have a different perspective, obviously, not having been. You were a journalist for a long time, always financial journalism. The Wall Street Journal, obviously, a huge part of your time, but as well, your many years running business news at CNBC. But now you've been running Brunswick. You see it from the other side. Again, I sort of just some initial perspective from you in terms of how you view business news, how you see it changing, and you know what it is like to view it from the other side.
David, thanks for having all of us here. And first, I thought this was a Jeopardy tryout, so I thought this was going to be. You know,
we already did
fun.
that.
I know. So
and somehow I don't know what happened.
I
don't know what happened. I had that job.
You were there.
It was
you were
my
there.
hand.
You were there.
Nik, actually, and Samantha and Jen Rogers and a bunch of people, we all prepared when I hosted Jeopardy a number of years ago. We actually we did a whole preparation thing, and it was great.
It was some of the most fun I've had. And before I answer your question, I'd say my one little tip now that I'm an advisor to people, I'd say, when you're in a room like this and your boss is in the room, I wouldn't say you used to work really hard.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that myself, but hey, man, I just won a lifetime achievement award.
I mean, you're working hard every day, David. I mean, you're like all in. I mean, you're working.
Wapner, wasn't I there today at like 3 o'clock? I mean, come on.
I mean, you're not going for the afternoon swim. You're working, man. I mean, every time they can't reach you, when Forkin calls. You're not away. You're really working. You're on a call.
Always working, Nik. I know that.
Look, in all seriousness, I think look, I've been in the news business, David. I used to compete against David as a reporter, covering M&A. So I'm probably one of the only people who can say that. It was a very, very tough job. I'd say the big change in the news business, including financial news, is in the world, at least David and I and a few of you grew up in, we had no idea who was reading our stuff for the most part. It was always a almost an anonymous thing. Somebody, Carl and I were interns together at the Wall Street Journal in 1993, right? You'd write a story about you'd write a story on McDonald's, and somebody would read it, and you didn't really know, right? Now we're in a different environment, and for better or for worse, the news business is run more like a business. Now the good news about that, in some ways, CNBC is a little bit of an anomaly because in television you don't have that direct interaction that a lot of other news organizations now have with their audience, where they can exactly see who is reading your stuff, who's consuming it, what's the engagement. You can put 5 different headlines on a story and see which one really resonates. So a lot of that is changing pretty dramatically, and there are parts of that. You're looking at engagement, you're looking at how your audience is reacting. You've got a mix of subscribers and advertisers in a different mix than you had earlier. So all of that in some ways is very good because you have that visibility, but it does in some ways make you more of a narrowcaster in many ways in financial news. So I think financial news stands out always because the audience tends to be a more sophisticated audience. It tends to be an audience which appreciates and is willing to pay for it in many, many different ways. And I think the rest of the news business is trying to become a little more like the financial news business.
Right. I want to follow up on a lot of this, and again, I'm happy to as well entertain questions from everybody. But Dan, let me come to you because first of all, you've had a long and varied career. You started in newsletters in part, like I did.
Right, I was in the trades covering retail brokers.
Yeah, and you've been at the tabloids, and obviously you've also been in television. You were at Reuters. You sort of straddled both worlds, but you've also had it's been a different time than it was, I think, to a certain extent than these two gentlemen, in part because, as I mentioned earlier, the great cable ecosystem has been collapsing, and that does put pressure on the organization as well.
Yeah, I think, first off, thank you for taking time from your busy swimming schedule to email me about this event. But one of the pieces in that sordid career I've had, I worked for the New York Post. It was a tabloid. I worked for Jim at thestreet.com, where we had a connection with our audience long before the rest of established media.
The newsletters, in some ways, the original.
In fact, I remember getting more options in the IPO because I was one of the most read writers at thestreet.com, right? So from that, and I think what helps us now is you have a slavish devotion to your audience. You understand how profoundly they need you and how profoundly they need to be engaged. So at the Post, where's Zach? Is Zach here? Zach Cowie, New York Post alum, M&A reporter. And my boss used to tell me, you think you have the best business section in America? I said, I do. I have all the plaques there that say best business section in America. And he goes, no, you have the most entertaining business section in America. And you can't leave people out. You have to pull them into the story. And they need us, but they have to want us too. And I think we're doubled down at that right now because we have to be more obvious than ever to keep that audience loyal, because it's probably not going to get more lucrative in the linear space, and we need to extend the connection to them to where they want more of us in more ways. We did an event with Dan and Mary here. Fast Money did a paid event last week, $899, standing room only. I mean, that's a connection of a brand with an audience, and that's what we have to kind of be aware of. We have to connect every day on a very kind of visceral level with them.
Yeah. It doesn't feel like the future of journalism is looking too good, Jonathan. I don't know. I mean, I don't know what you think about this and or television journalism.
Yeah, it's not looking too bright because, I would argue the most entertaining business section is just as important as the most important business section, because without entertainment, as you point out, there's no point. Nobody's
We use a lot of Shakira pictures.
Yeah, whatever it takes. Also, $8.99 a head. That was pre-tariff, so I don't know what's going to happen next week.
We didn't allow Canadians. No Canadians.
No, I think the problem with news on television is that it is not really news, and it was always not that newsy. But now it's really more politically trying to step around issues, and I find that one of the biggest selling points for CNBC remains, even though it's not apolitical, it is not a political morass, and it's not. You don't have to turn away because you're going to hear an opinion you don't necessarily like. It's not about that. It's about actual numbers and something tangible, as opposed to another cable network that might have a hard time being too against the president. And I think this comes down to, this is my big theory now, that there is no middle anymore. And they used to say, CNN used to try and be in the middle. There's no middle. I produced, the last major thing I did was an election night special on Amazon, which is has a streaming platform and reached 4 million viewers plus, and got some good notices and did not commit any major felonies along the way, so I was happy with that. And their mandate to us, after we sold them the idea, was it has to look different and it has to be down the middle. And so we took that challenge, and I think we ended up pretty much with both of those. Now,
what does down the middle mean?
Well, now, then, pre-November 7th, down the middle was equal parts Democratic, equal parts Republican. Now, there is no middle, and you have either for or against the president. And that has implications far beyond anything we can probably speculate about here. But I think that has changed just as much as the economic game and the lack of cable subscriptions and just the bad business of cable TV. That has as profound an effect as anything, and a chilling effect, and it makes it harder to do the job.
Yeah. I mean, something that I've always greatly appreciated, particularly in these last 10 years or whatever it's been, 8 years, 9 years, is, we're fact-based because people's money is at stake. And ultimately, it's not about partisanship. It's about getting the story right. And that has been a relief, because to be otherwise, and yet still, Dan, we're still viewed, I see it all the time, well, you guys are this or that. I'm like, no, we're just about telling you what's actually happening.
It's good that we get both.
Yeah.
Right? It's good that some people think we're communists and some people think we're fascists. It's kind of nice to kind of be in that sweet spot.
They were not mutually exclusive.
One of the things we think about, and I know you're 100% attendance at all of my editorial meetings, is you're well steeped in this.
You have editorial meetings?
Yeah, there you go. We try, I told the Washington Bureau a while ago, I don't care if tariffs are right or wrong. I don't care if any of these policies are right or wrong. Let's get to delivery. Let's get to impact. Let's get to right away and be useful to the audience, because they don't care whether they're right or wrong either. They have to live with them, and they have to invest around them. So we can argue and we can debate and we can go on social and, find our tribe. But on the air, every day, we have to take a stand on how this is landing on our audience. And that's where we have to draw those lines. And it's difficult because we all have very visceral feelings around the conversation that's going on. So it's really tough to be neutral. I drop in a squawk in the morning and my head spins, but that's fine. That's the magic in some ways. But the real value to the audience is bringing it back.
Yeah.
David, I'd say one thing. I've been gone from CNBC almost 7 years, so I was there almost 9 years. And I'd say, just to emphasize what you said, which I think is really important for this audience, is don't underestimate the power of what you guys do in terms of original reporting and interviewing, because to Jonathan's point, so much of what now is called news is really just commentary and aggregating of other people's news. And when I worked at CNBC, I was able to say it's the greatest place, it's wonderful, etc. I didn't realize how important a role it plays till I really left, because you see the authority that you and Jim and Carl and Scott and Pisani and others over here have, because you guys are trying to call it straight. So when Jim talks about tariffs and he's talking about impact, he's talking about the impact. When Becky's talking to Brian Cornell, she's talking about really, I think all those things are very fact-based. And you may opine on it afterwards, but there's an original base which is super important across medium. So that's true in digital, it's true in the world that we all saw during, in a strange way, the COVID and Trump gave the entire media business, not just the news business, an artificial lift where everyone assumed this world was going to last forever, where people were going to sit and watch content for 15 hours a day and do nothing else and just ride their Peloton bikes every day. That's what they were going to do. Well, guess what? That world is now over, and the folks who are going to adapt and survive are the ones who really produce essential content. And I think for all of you who do this every day, that is something I wouldn't lose sight of.
Nik, I have to ask you, it's a bit off topic, although we didn't really have a topic to begin with.
There was no pre-call.
We didn't have any. It's like me and Jim in the morning. We don't talk at all. You can't talk. But how are you, to the extent you can share it? I mean, corporations right now, some of them have to be tying themselves in knots. What kind of advice are you being asked for and or giving in terms of just how you navigate? We talk about how we're navigating this current world, but what are you seeing?
So I'd say, I assume you're referring to the world in D.C. as opposed to the larger world,
yes,
right?
Sorry. I am speaking more specifically about that. Yes.
So I think it strikes me a little bit like when COVID first hit. Everyone for the first month because everyone assumed 2.0 would be the same as 1.0. It's not the same. And a little like when COVID hit, where everyone for the first month was almost a little bit stunned and going, okay, this is just going to change. Things will just revert. Now they're starting to adapt to a different reality and trying to think about, okay, what does engagement look like? What does lack of engagement look like? There'll be a category of executives and companies which go, okay, we don't want to engage. We feel we can get what we need without engaging, or we can rely on an association. You'll have some companies who go, okay, it's a different kind of. It's interesting to see a lot of companies with big government affairs shops, where some of those shops are almost obviated because there's a more direct line into different departments than they used to be. So there's a level of engagement that's going to happen. In some ways, there's a lot more clarity about what needs to be done. There's a lot less. Now, there may be chaotic element to it, but it isn't unclear that you need to invest in the U.S. You need to do certain things. So I don't think those things are as ambiguous as people want. In some ways, it's almost jarringly clear. So it's more how can your organization really adapt to it. So without going into specifics, but it is very different for each industry, for each company, for each sector. People did a fair amount of planning for it. People were more prepared in some ways, but it's still become much faster, and the variety of stuff the variety of actions are more, just much more. So then it's a question of how many of those are going to stick, how many of those are going to, exhaust themselves to a certain extent. I mean, just look at your business and the media business. There's a lot of activity around that.
Yeah.
How many of those will stick?
No, I know. There's a lot more pitfalls too.
That is something that no one reports on, which is interesting. I saw Steve Ratner's piece in the Times. I never know what day it is because I read it online and then it's in the paper. I think it was yesterday. He spoke to business leaders about how they feel about the president. And it's not about what some cable networks say it is every single day. For business leaders, and again, this is something they don't report on, they're concerned with, and you would know this better than I, but they're concerned with, it's not, the alternative was worse to them. And they didn't like the anti-business climate of the previous administration, and they didn't like the options, the optionality of what the election provided, and so they made their choice, and now they're making do. And that explains why there isn't more corporate protest to some things that other cable channels might be interested in protesting. Yeah. And I think that's fascinating, and that no one talks about it.
Yeah. Well, we've talked about it.
You guys do.
Yeah,
you guys do. But
Yeah.
you guys get to the other unique selling point of CNBC has always been, and you're the prime example of this, is that you can give. You give the facts, you give the dollars, and so whatever anything means, you explain to the audience, but you also are allowed and have, I remember advocating for this, giving your point of view, which is different from an opinion. It's saying, I lived through this the last time, here's what happened, here's why I would maybe worry about this happening, versus, oh, isn't this terrible that this is where we are and this is what's happening.
Right. It's the only benefit for having done this for 38 years.
You now have a
Yeah.
broken
We can go
clock.
back- we
I
can
call
go
it the
back
broken
to
clock syndrome.
A lot of experiences. I'm in all seriousness, I would, if there are some questions that people have, feel free. Yes, sir.
Can you finish the story you started about Goldman Sachs?
You know, I think it was
hazy
AIG.
memory.
I think it may have
It was
been-
more of a generic. If I went on the air with what I know,
Yeah.
the entire street would collapse. Which so I. Of course,
That was listen. I mean, for any of us who were reporting during that period, it was so intense, and obviously, you're never going to really have anything quite like it in your career, where you literally wondered whether the financial system was going to collapse. I mean, we were almost there. And by the way, even when we thought we were kind of out of the woods, you know, after TARP, we still weren't. I mean, that day, Immel joked about this, which I thought was bizarro world. Oh, I almost couldn't roll my commercial paper. You remember that? I'm like, yeah, that would have been it, done.
Or you interviewing Alan Schwartz while Elliott Spitzer was getting arrested, right?
Well, me interviewing Alan Schwartz,
Bear
Bear
Stearns.
Stearns, which then people blamed for the fall of that company. That was March of 08. No.
March of
No.
08.
March of 08.
March
March
of
of
08.
08.
Yeah, you're right. March of 08.
March of 08. And then we had a break-in for Spitzer. That was horrible. But you see, I can't blame you for that one.
No,
Who can I
wasn't-
blame for that one? You.
I wasn't there. I was.
You.
He
Yeah,
was
you.
there. I was. I remember it well because I was running money investing at the Wall Street Journal at the time, and
Right.
we remember, and we had the same decision, which was we like, if we write the story, Bear Stearns could go under.
Well, we went live when Lehman Brothers went under. It was,
We went live that night.
Yeah.
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 We all just kind of showed up. And
Yeah.
everybody said, "All right," and that was we went well into the I mean, it was a unique moment, obviously, but then it went on. You thought it was maybe it's.
That was over 4 hours. It was a 1 hour show.
Right.
And we were 27 minutes into the A block, and a call came down that said, "Do you think you guys could do another hour?" I said, "Well, we haven't taken our first commercial, so yeah, odds are pretty good."
Yeah.
And that was a lot of. I mean, there's nothing there was nothing like that period to report, and to have conversations you could not actually conceive of having had, where people would say, well, what is the real value of money? It's just paper. What do I bury in my backyard? And then I do remember rushing in. I don't remember that specific but I do remember AIG. Like they just lost $99 billion because I was very focused on AIG. We had other people. Which I think ended up certainly being was a huge threat to the financial system. We have any other? Yeah. Oh wow, we got a lot now. You get to talk so much. This gentleman right here. Yes.
So CNBC and cable news in general, is the business model more AOL holding on to the revenue, or is it more Microsoft evolving into a different business model? Where does it go from here?
Wait. What do you mean? Sorry.
Well, AOL went down with the revenue, looking for the $22 a month, right? And eventually went away. Microsoft was able to evolve and let go of the business model of Windows and
Yeah.
to a point where now they've evolved to it. So they didn't become extinct.
Right.
So where does it go from here?
Well, there's a gentleman behind you who's the president of CNBC who's trying to sneak out, Casey Sullivan, who I, by the way, should thank as well for helping put this together. Thank you, Casey. I don't know if he wants to actually take that question. Anybody here want to take a shot at it? I mean, we are at a key moment here in terms of how do we, I mentioned in my remarks, this is a business that has been incredible, right? So many people who paid you every month never actually used your product. It's gone or it's going away. still what? Where are we? 60 million homes still? Something like that, right? So it's still not bad, but it's going one way, and faster perhaps than we'd even anticipated. At least it hasn't slowed. And so it's incumbent upon us to figure out a way to diverge and to come up with all sorts of different revenue sources. Obviously, digital is a key one, but even that's changing all the time, Dan. I mean, CNBC.com is not enough.
No, it would take decades, right, of erosion and buildup. You know, you think about it, and I think I like the fact that I have the example of the music industry before me, and that I was at the tabloid. I was in the last tabloid war. After that, none of them mattered. So I've been through these dying things before, and I do like the bridge of the business we have now still being strong, and us being smart enough to say we need a new trick. You know, we need a new trick. We have to do something a little different. And I don't know what sticks. I don't know if it's more subscription products. I don't know if it's nonlinear TV. I don't know what it is. Get rid of all the anchors. I don't know what the evolution is going to be, and we've tried a couple across my career. But yeah, I'm glad that we have some playbooks, in past industries who face these things, and we won't be AOL. We won't be surprised.
Well, I'm sure a lot of us here agree.
Thank you. Brian Steele in the back there no longer works for us, so he can ask a question.
How do you think AI is going to impact real journalism? In the corporate world, frankly, we're looking at, replacing all the marketing people. And I'm just curious because that is going to be a very quick switch, even faster than people disconnecting from cable. So I'm just curious how you see that happen.
It's a great question. Anybody who wants to take a shot at that one?
I could take another one. I guess
running
because
a business.
but I don't feel like it's. Look, I think the kind of journalism that gets replaced by AI is relatively commoditized and useless now. And I think to have a David Faber, to have a Jim Cramer, to have any of the great journalists in these organizations creating original content, tell me something I haven't heard before, tell me something I haven't thought about, that's where the difference is going to be. And I don't know that, I think for a lot of commoditized stuff, this is going to be more damaging to digital than it will be to TV, and it'll be more damaging to wholesale media sites than it will be to the pucks or the Axioses or the Politicos. But I don't know that AI replaces anything we want to spend our day doing anyway, right? I mean, you don't want to do an earnings story, do you?
No, not a basic one, no.
No,
No,
or what is it going to do?
value,
So I don't
yeah.
know what it does. Look, I think it can help original reporting by helping you get through documents and helping us sift through public things and finding disclosures. But maybe I'm Pollyanna, but I still think what we do is special, and that that only the worst parts of it are.
Anybody see it differently?
I think it's. I'd say I agree 80% with what Dan said. I think it's moving at a speed with which I used to think it was commoditized, and now I see some stuff where I'll give you a very simple example. I did a performance review with one of my colleagues the other day, and he came to me and says, "I'm kind of struggling with your direction that you gave me. This is a very, we have a proper conversation. This is all in 3 dimensions. We're having a conversation." And he's like, "You know what? I took your performance review letter and I put in AI, and I feel much clearer now about my direction." And I was like, "So wait a minute, you're telling me that half an hour I spent with you and I talked to you about here are some of the goals," and he was like, "Yeah, no, that was helpful, but this gave me more of an action plan of how to do it." And I thought that was, pretty smart. I was at a dinner last night where we were talking about with a pretty prominent executive, and I asked her, she was like, I said, "Do you play around with ChatGPT much?" I said, "How about I just put in there, tell me the corporate strategy that you should implement to push your organization through this great period of transformation?" Pretty not, it was there. So to Dan's point, obviously, David Faber finding out that, Lehman Brothers is going to happen, Disney's going to buy Fox, that stuff AI is never going to be able to do. But, how the rundown is prepared, what's going to happen, smart questions to ask, going into an interview, Yeah,
I don't think it's the job.
It could be
functions.
liberating.
Yeah, I don't think it's the job functions that are going to be affected. I think it's going to be competitors who use AI in ways we haven't even thought of that will then change the landscape, and it'll end up like Planet of the Apes with the Statue of Liberty on the beach. No, I think I'm kidding. Just seeing if anybody's actually paying attention.
You have a year on that?
Yeah. No, I think it's going to change absolutely everything about every website, every app, everything that you read will be in some way put together by AI, and then that will put pressure on.
I bet if you were going to, Jim was going to interview somebody tomorrow, and I put in there and say, what are the questions I think Jim Cramer are going to ask, the CEO of Coca-Cola?
You've done this, haven't you?
I have not done this, but it's a good idea. I should do it. It's pretty, it'd be pretty interesting to see what the result is.
Without a doubt. By the way, working for Amazon, was it any different? Was it a different process at all? What do you think?
I mean, it was interesting because they're not TV people, and they don't really think about things. That their idea of TV is spending $1 million or $2 million on an episode of Reacher, which I think is a great show. But when it comes to a live event and news stuff, that's not really their strong suit.
So you're able to just get them to spend lots of money?
We got them
this
to spend
costs
the
like
money.
$17 million.
It took a while. It took a while to get them to actually give us the money, but we've managed to do it in the right amount of time. I'll be interested to see how James Bond turns out. Let's just say. I think it's going to be a fascinating experiment in commerce, because I don't know if you read the stories about when the Broccoli family met with several of the Amazon development executives. There were questions about, well, why is James Bond a hero? I was, oh boy, this is going to be a problem. So I don't know. I think it'll be interesting. But no, they are in a great position being able to choose what they do, and they are, in a sense, the future, in that they're a platform more than anything else. And they think they're already in the news business, and this is not giving away any secrets, because they have a series of fast TV channels, which is not the future of television news, it's the present. And they have local news from every market in the country on. So if you're in New York and you want to watch LA, you can watch LA, and they think that covers them in news to begin with. That's their entree to news. So I think it's an interesting dynamic for them, and how they expand on that and what they end up doing. But they have Apple TV on their platforms. You can watch Apple, and everything is all one giant bucket now, and they want to make what they can from doing it. None of it's making any money, but they have a lot of it, and so there's a chance to try some new things. And so the main difference is you can do 10 hours, and nobody's like yelling at you to hit a break, or Sandy, you would love it there. You can just do whatever you want. But they're a little cautious, and they don't want news. I mean, let's be honest. Nobody's starting out today, and this gets back to the AI question that Brian asked. I am a firm believer in the next iteration or the next development in television news is not going to be decided in Englewood Cliffs or a paneled conference room on 6th Avenue. None of us sitting here are probably in on whatever the next app or news delivery system is. It's going to happen somewhere else, in Mumbai or Silicon Valley or someplace in Brooklyn, God knows, where they're going to leverage AI, and they're going to leverage common sense, and they're going to figure out why 90% of what we all do is not necessarily necessary. And none of us are thinking about that, because we can't really know it. No. So I just think that's why it's such an interesting moment.
I am going to license myself, though, as a simulation at this point.
Well, you did that. You and Sorkin.
I did with
that.
Sorkin.
Yeah.
We did something, yep.
And it was good, actually.
It was interesting. But, I mean, we're not that far about it. We do Kid in the Morning about it. Carl and Jim and I, we talk a lot about this, as you might expect as well. We're going to get everybody out of here, so I'll just take a couple more, and then we'll allow people to get a drink. Yeah.
I agree with you that what you do is special. Piggybacking off what you just said, how do you compete in a world where there's podcasts, that there is no fact-checking, people are going into different forums for information, and one of the things that I love about CNBC is that you call balls and strikes and you get accurate fact-based information, whereas now we're in this attention economy, which I've heard people spout a lot. How do you maintain that engagement and getting people to be entertained and go to your network or wherever you're producing producing content while competing with people that don't have the same standards?
That's a good question. I mean, to add on that, I think it is fascinating that so many people have gravitated towards this long form of programming. It's kind of like radio from 80 years ago, where you listen to something for 2 hours. But in terms of accuracy, anybody want to take a shot at that?
I'll just say that what I worry about much more is less that podcast world and more the TikTok world. So there's no editor of TikTok you can call, and the level of misinformation, some of the we did a simulation with a client where we pointed to, it was a very interesting thing. So you say, assume David Faber is the CEO of a company, and David Faber said, at one point he made some inappropriate remark about insider trading. And it got picked up, he kind of walked it back, it wasn't really a big deal, etc. 2 years later, something pops up saying David Faber has accepted that it's okay to do insider trading, and he's done it, and a bunch of stuff has happened. It's absolutely not true, but there's a video which looks like David Faber. There's stuff that says that it's more than just the deep fake stuff. It's stuff which will just takes on a life of its own, and it's very hard to unwind. And you've seen that with companies in small cases, but there are versions of that which you can just see happening very easily. And the versions we used to see in the old days was somebody would put out a fake press release or a tweet which wasn't accurate. I mean, that's like small bore stuff. It's the true misinformation which is really, really hard to. Once it's out in the ether, you can't really get it back.
You guys were talking about that today, though. You're talking about how the Doge, like 5 of the top 10 Doge savings are not real. Becky was asking that. So, I think it comes from all sides, and you have to hope that because CNBC is CNBC and fact-based, it'll be a haven for people who need the information that they know they can trust, as opposed to God knows where.
I do always come back to the hope, at least, and the expectation that to the extent people are making investment decisions, the markets are still run to a certain extent on actual fact and or information that you have to know is real. That gives me some comfort, I guess. Not a lot, but some.
But you have to react in a different speed. So, imagine you're a CEO of a grocery store chain, and you're caught on video saying, "Yeah, we're just charging our clients."
Is that what happened to Rodney McMullen?
I have no idea. And you say, "Oh, yeah, we're just charging way too much, and we're getting away with it," or whatever it is, and it's caught on tape, and it's doctored, and that's not really what he said, and it just gets out there. It's going to be,
Yeah.
I do want somebody to break that story and find out what the hell happened.
I don't know. I mean, Jim's been trying. Sarah knew the guy really well. I don't know. Nothing. I've been asked that. I know this is the CEO of Kroger, who
bunch of
yesterday,
financial journalists.
really
Somebody should find
bizarre
that story.
press release, got dismissed immediately as a CEO, longtime CEO, and for reasons that had nothing to do with the company, nothing to do with the financials of the company, nothing to do with an associate of the company. So, of course, our imaginations have run wild. But we don't know. Yes, Mr. Kramer.
I wanted to ask the panel something about you. I sit next to David every morning. We're talking about Wald, and he doesn't have it. It's not yet. And somebody else goes out with it, and they don't know the truth. And nothing ever happens to them. And they get the story wrong, and nothing ever happens to them. Why does nothing ever happen to them?
They're not getting 38-year lifetime achievement awards. And I think that's really what this is about.
In M&A, there is a lot of reporting, as you guys well know, that is not necessarily fully accurate. I do find it a frustration when I hear about certain things and I choose not to report on them because they're not actually going to happen.
All of us who worked with David know this exercise. Do I have enough? Yes, you have enough. No, you don't have enough.
It's not a story. It's not a story.
And that's how it should be, right?
And then most of the time I don't go, and then somebody else does it, and I have to clean up
one
the
of
mess.
one of my favorite memories is of you breaking Disney Fox, and it was, and I'll never forget it because it was, some of you would remember, Rob Contino, longtime producer. One of his parents passed away. We were at the funeral, and I'm trying to urge David, go with the story. I'm going to wait 3 more hours. I'm like, no, go with the story. And I'm literally looking at my watch and trying to type very discreetly while I'm at the service going, go, go, go. But it is that kind of judgment that you've built, which I think is a real credit to Jonathan's point about when you say stuff, and again, I'll say this now that I'm on the other side, when David Faber says it, you can take it to the bank. And it used to be that a lot of other places had that same category. Unfortunately, that's not the case.
Bancroft. Yeah,
Dow
that was
Jones.
a perfect example of like
sore subject for me. I'll
So
tell
he
you
was
that.
at the Journal at the time.
God,
I mean, he knew
weeks
about it, but he
of-
couldn't.
we
report it.
all I felt like we all knew about it for years, but it took a while to get it.
No, that was
nailed.
a
But
good
thank
break.
God. But thank God.
My worst moment in journalism ever.
Was when I broke that story. By the way, I'm really enjoying this. Let's just keep going. I love this. This is great. Let's take one more from the audience, and then Myron Candell is here, by the way.
Number one, everyone wishes you guys well in your new ownership. That's number one. Number two, I started in journalism 75 years ago. I never dreamed that the profession that I loved and worked at, tried to do well at, would be considered an enemy of the people. Half of America thinks we are enemies of the people. How will that affect journalism in the years ahead?
It already is. I mean, we were talking about disinformation and deep fakes, and you have a president who is suing CBS for editing a video, which, if anybody in this room has actually looked at the transcript and the tape, is the craziest.
We do it every day.
Yeah, lawsuit of all time. I mean, and by the way, I love Putin. I don't understand. It's the chilling effect we're already frozen. There are networks that there's legitimate reporting that won't happen because of what it might cause.
You have some thoughts on this, don't you, Nick?
I do. I fully agree with Jonathan in the sense that I think there's there's obviously the erosion of trust, which is real.
You had a specific thought on CBS as well?
I do have a specific thought on CBS, which I think there's like Jonathan says, I think it is, of all the things that I've seen in terms of a lawsuit which doesn't seem to have any reason to be settled. It happens every day. There's an edit that happens every day. And I think it's, to me, play it out. Let the lawsuit play out. Have faith in the justice system.
The only problem is there's a merger waiting to happen.
Well,
or
I'm
a
waiting for David Faber to interview Brendan Carr and ask him the question.
By the way,
are you really going? He was on with Ben Smith. I watched the whole interview.
that whole thing too.
I watched the whole thing too.
And he was very haughty.
Yeah, but I would say, ask the question: you're going to block a merger?
Yeah, we are
because the president of the United States has sued. But somebody should ask that question.
Well,
you know the answer.
Yeah, it's now you see all my bosses here. It's kind of funny, but we will.
David, there's a woman here who's been trying to ask a question for a while.
So. Thank you, Nick. Yes.
Just wondering, piggybacking off of everything tonight, we've been talking a lot about social media and just how quickly disinformation can spiral there. How do we manage the proliferation of, I guess the term is newsfluencers, but some of whom, yes, look like me, sorry, and some of whom are like genuinely, seemingly former journalists trying to do their best. Where's the balance? How do we call balls and strikes and yet keep the respect of younger audiences?
It's a good question. I mean, especially, again, the ability, anybody can have a channel now, essentially.
Well, look, again, for those of us a certain generation, there was a time when this thing called cable news came out, and all the haughty newspaper print people were like, oh my God, who the hell are these people? What did they know about business news? So I do think there's a certain evolution that happens, and I was having a conversation with somebody at lunch today who was complaining about their kids using ChatGPT for writing college essays. I said, look, our parents kidded us about using calculators. It's going to happen. So you can either fight it. So I think there's a version of this which is, I'm not as freaked out about it because I still have faith in humanity and people wanting to do the right thing and actually come up with the right answers. And people talk about the world we grew up in. By the way, the only business news that existed on television before Mike Candell came around was 30 seconds on the nightly news, right? There was no other business television.
Well, Ray Brady won this award, actually. Yeah.
And so I think getting the news, we're doing a session for our clients around news influencers and how you work with them and how you do it in a smart way. But it's uncharted territory for a lot of people, no question.
I think we have. I just want to throw one thing out there that as we might need to amend our analogies and metaphors, because calling balls and strikes now includes a computer and a camera that does it. So it's not what it used to be, even in the majors.
I'll take one more, and then we're going to let everybody get back to their to what they want to do, sir.
So you talk about facts, and that when you're talking about investment, you have to stick with the fact, and you have to make sure that that's what you're getting out there. But during the political campaign, so much disinformation and so many lies were thrown about, and the major news publications were committing journalistic malpractice by not calling it out, and not saying this is a lie, and not saying this is what the real truth is. For instance, just recently, Trump goes and says Ukraine started this war, when in fact most people know that it's not the truth.
What is starting, really?
Yeah, I mean, although plenty of news organizations have said that is not the case. I mean, listen, as I said, I come in every day, not to mention because I have incredible colleagues like Carl and Jim. Thank you both for being here, by the way. But beyond that, who I love to be with, but also because I don't have to deal with that kind of stuff. I mean, it's a great relief. And frankly, in general news, I don't know how they deal with this stuff every day.
They don't.
It's got to be so hard. They don't. What do you mean they don't?
They avoid it, or they're Quislings.
It's a difficult environment. Well, to end on that sad note, but listen, thank you all so much for being here.